You don't know it's the end. Not at first. It begins too quietly for something so final. A sound, maybe, a flicker in your chest, an unexpected weight in your arms. The kind of feeling that you'd normally dismiss because life is full of small discomforts, until the small one grows, until your brain pauses. Time slows, but it's not just slow. It's strange. There's a sudden sharpness in your awareness, like every detail of the room you're in, every crack in the wall, every wrinkle in your bed sheets becomes too visible, too loud, too real. Then the opposite. Everything pulls back. Too quiet, too dim, like the room is no longer yours, like you're watching it from behind a sheet of ice. And the strangest part? You feel calm. That's the first betrayal. Your brain, in its final attempt to protect you, releases a flood of endorphins. Not panic, not fear. Euphoria. Your thoughts sharpen like broken glass. Memories risen out your favorite ones. Not the moments you'd think your soul would cling to, but random flashes. A childhood hallway. The sound of your mother's voice yelling from another room. The taste of cold metal from biting a coin. Your mind throws everything at the wall. Not for meaning, for preservation, because it knows what you don't. That the system is shutting down. That the oxygen is disappearing. That neurons are misfiring like sparks in a dying engine. It's not pain that defines this threshold. It's distortion. You begin to hear sounds that aren't there. Whispers, echoes, maybe your own voice, maybe someone else's. You try to speak, but your mouth feels disconnected. You try to move, but the limbs respond like they belong to someone else. Then it hits. The unreality, like something breaks in the center of your perception. Reality loses its texture. Objects lose meaning. Time isn't time anymore. It folds. 1 second becomes 1,000, or none. You're not sure if you're thinking or remembering. You're not sure if your body is still lying there. You're not sure if this is the moment of death, or something after. And somewhere, deep inside, a part of you whispers, "This is it." But you don't panic. You watch. You become an observer to your own disintegration. Your brain isn't designed to experience death consciously, but in some cruel twist, it tries anyway. It fights to make a story out of chaos. It forces meaning into the collapse. This is the threshold, the line between existence and extinction. And you are standing on it, not as a soul ascending, not as a person fading, but as a machine still running diagnostic checks in the milliseconds before the blackout. It's not beautiful. It's not horrifying. It's uncanny because it feels more real than anything else you've lived. And you realize this isn't the moment your life flashes before your eyes. This is the moment you finally understand it never belonged to you. It doesn't happen like in the movies. There's no dramatic gasp, no final heartbeat echoing like a drum. There's just fragmentation. You are still conscious, but not in a way that makes sense. The pieces of your identity begin to drift apart like burned paper in slow motion. Your name slips first, then your story, and after that, you forget that you were ever trying to hold on. You might hear someone calling you a real voice, or maybe the brain's desperate trick to simulate continuity. You might see light flickering on the ceiling, or maybe it's the last neurons in your visual cortex firing without order. Your brain is still working, but it's no longer prioritizing logic. It's hallucinating structure where none exists. Memories get scrambled into dreams. Dreams morph into voices. Voices echo back as thoughts. You remember someone who betrayed you, but their face is wrong. You remember a place you've never been, but the emotion feels true. Everything is reconstructed, but poorly. The hippocampus tries to organize chaos, even while it's suffocating from lack of oxygen. Your prefrontal cortex, once in charge of decisions and control, is offline. It's the limbic brain that takes over now. the part buried deep beneath everything that made you you, the animal self, the raw processor of fear, pain, survival, and yet you feel strangely safe. That's the paradox. Because when the outer parts of the brain start dying, they take your fear with them. The brainstem is last to go, and it does not traffic in emotion. It is biological command, heartbeat, breath, core function. So the parts of you that once felt grief, regret, love, they're not completely gone, but they're too far to access now. It's like someone turned off the hallway lights between the rooms of your mind, and now you're stuck in a place with no doors, no clocks, no sense of who you were trying to be. And that's when it begins. The mirror effect. You feel yourself being observed, not by a god, not by a presence, but by your own mind folding in on itself. Your thoughts circle. Repeat. Fracture. I am. What was? Why? And then nothing. Just loops. Just the internal echo of consciousness refusing to admit it's dying. But here's what no one tells you. The brain doesn't shut down like a switch. It breaks apart like ice on a thawing lake. In cracks. In tremors. With moments of terrifying lucidity. Brief windows where you feel everything, but can no longer respond to it. You might see your body from above, but it's not mystical. It's neurological misfiring. The angular gyrus responsible for self-perception creates the illusion of detachment because your brain can no longer reconcile internal signals with sensory input. So it says, this must be happening to someone else. And the scariest part is, as you believe it, you start watching your own body like it's a stranger. You see your chest rising barely. You notice your fingers twitch, but you feel nothing. You are still alive, but you are no longer you. And if someone were to touch you, shake you, scream at you, you wouldn't flinch because the part of you that flinches is gone. There's no final thought, no sentence that ties it all together, just a cold, collapsing system, still pretending it matters. And you are now just noise in a broken machine. They told you death is peaceful, that at the end, your life flashes before your eyes. But they forgot to mention, the brain doesn't replay your life like a movie. It reconstructs it from fragments, fears, false memories, and broken impressions that never truly fit together. What you see in your final moments is not reality. It's a hallucination of identity. One last desperate attempt to prove to itself that it was once something whole. You don't see your childhood birthday. You see a distorted version of it, a memory combined with a dream you once had, mixed with a face that doesn't belong there. You don't hear your mother's voice. You hear her tone, merged with static, wrapped in the echo of voices you heard in passing years ago. A teacher, a lover, a stranger on the subway. It's all mashed together now. Your brain wants to tell a story. It needs meaning before it dies. So it creates a final stage, a theater made of collapsing neurons and dying electricity. And you are both the actor and the audience. But the script keeps changing. One moment you're walking through a familiar house, then the walls melt into a hospital corridor. Then the tiles become waves, and you're underwater, but you're not drowning. You're just waiting for something to click. Sometimes, the mind invents people you've never met, a man in a red coat who guides you toward a door, a woman whispering words in a language you don't speak, but somehow understand. Sometimes, it's darker. You're falling. Forever. Not fast. Just falling. Not down. Not up. Just into nothing. And every time you try to scream, there's no voice. Because the brain no longer needs the vocal cords. It only simulates the emotion of screaming. The idea of fear, but not the sound. You start to hear music. Not from the outside, but from inside your own synapses. Soft, echoing, then discordant. The kind of melody you'd hear in a dream you never wanted to wake up from, or a nightmare that never truly ended. Here's the horrifying part. You might feel euphoric as the neocortex dies and dopamine floods one last time to ease the brain's agony. You might feel like you're becoming something more, as if the pain is finally gone, as if the suffering meant something, as if you're about to understand the answer, but the answer never comes. Because the brain wasn't designed to explain its own death, it was designed to survive. And when survival becomes impossible, it improvises, with illusions, with fantasy, with beautiful lies stitched together from every piece of your broken memory. Some people call this the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's not light. It's misfiring neurons. It's the temporal lobe collapsing in on itself, flashing imagery without sequence. No tunnel, no peace. Just the illusion of meaning in a place where meaning can no longer exist. And somewhere inside that chaos, you might say something to yourself. A final sentence, a phrase that doesn't belong to language, but to the nervous system itself. A whisper made of electricity. Something like, I was here, or it mattered, but it didn't. Not to the universe, not to the silence, only to the mind that was so afraid to die, it had to lie to itself as its last act of existence. There is a moment, and you won't know when it begins, where all processing stops. But the illusion continues. You're not thinking anymore. Not really. You're not calculating or reacting. There is no more time, no more separation between before and after. There's only suspension. A stillness so deep, it becomes a landscape. You are no longer in your body, but not because you've left it. It's because the very idea of a body, of location, of boundaries, has collapsed. Your sensory system has gone dark, but consciousness, or whatever's left of it, doesn't turn off like a light. It fades like a dying frequency, and before it goes completely, it vibrates at its strangest. This is the moment where near-death survivors say, I saw everything from above, or I was in a room of white. But the truth is, they didn't see a room. They saw the mind's panic, manifested into images it could grasp. The brain, deprived of oxygen, begins to manufacture clarity, but it's artificial. It's the clarity of a drowning system, trying to assemble one last coherent illusion before it implodes. Some say they heard a voice, others a presence. But the voice didn't come from outside. It was an echo of the self, a recursive loop where the brain speaks to itself to pretend that it's not alone. The human mind is wired to refuse extinction. So even as your cells die, even as blood stops reaching the deepest parts of the cortex, the last few neurons fire with imagined continuity. They show you doors, corridors, faces of people you miss, places you've never actually been, but feel like home. It's not peace. It's not horror either. It's weightlessness, and not in a physical sense. Your identity begins to untangle, not all at once, but strand by strand. You forget your name, then the concept of names, then language itself becomes noise. Then noise becomes vibration. Then there's no difference between vibration and nothing. And in that final stretch, the brain does one last thing. It releases a cascade of chemicals, DMT, possibly, or maybe a cocktail we haven't fully identified. But it's not to make you trip. It's to dissolve the self so that the shutdown doesn't feel like failure. It feels like departure, like stepping into a threshold you can't define. You might think you're flying. You might think you're floating. You might think you've become everything. But what's actually happening is that the brain has let go of the illusion of separateness to save you from terror. And it works, because most people report a strange sense of beauty right before they're revived. But what if you're not revived? What happens if there's no one there? to bring you back, then the process doesn't pause. It completes. There is no afterlife, not in the way you were taught. There's no reunion, no judgment, no heavens, no flames, just a final, untraceable second where all consciousness melts into absolute stillness. You don't feel peace. You don't feel fear. You don't feel anything because the one who could feel it, the you, is gone, not vanished, not transported, just no longer constructed. And that's the horror, isn't it? That the end isn't dramatic. It's not filled with meaning. It's just a quiet failure of a system that spent its whole existence trying to matter. And in the final frame, before the story ends, your brain whispers something that no one will ever hear. A sentence that isn't made of words, but of memory, identity, and fear. It says, "Was I real?" And there is no answer, because the thing that asked the question is no longer there to understand it.